Thank you, Willy. Thank you to Pages. Thank you to the local organizing committee. It's a great honor and a big responsibility to be the last speaker of this OSM meeting. I hope that my voice will be okay, because I am a palynologist with important pollen allergy, and springtime is not my best moment. So I hope that all will be okay. We are here to talk about climate variability, vegetation dynamics, and human-environment interactions in continental Mediterranean Iberia during last glacial cycle, because one of the main objectives of Pages is to understand the Earth's past to obtain better predictions of future climate and environment responses, as we can observe in this well-known figure from the last IPCC report, which shows changes in average surface temperature and precipitation at a global scale. Because the global scale is really important, but both the regional and local scale too. In fact, Mediterranean region is one of the main focus of different Pages initiatives, as we have been able to see during this OSM meeting. It represents a complex environmental scenario resulting of particular geographical characteristics and a long history of climate-humans interactions. Besides, Mediterranean region is one of the most potentially affected areas by global warming in future projections, as we can see in this well-known map from Giorgia Lionello, who shows projected increase of summer temperatures. Thus, it is a perfect case study for Pages' interest. And in the Mediterranean, it is located a particularly complex area, the Iberian Peninsula, a region characterized by a strong contrast both in climate and current vegetation composition, which represents, in a relatively small surface, almost all Mediterranean ecosystem types. In terms of landscape variability, Iberia is a complete puzzle, as you can see in these different landscape pictures. From this great landscape variability, it is necessary to focus our interest to inland areas of Mediterranean Iberia. But why? Because inner continental Iberia is one of the most vulnerable regions to global change and consequent impacts. In fact, because it is also characterized by particularly harsh environments due to climatic extremes, like you can see in these different landscape pictures. But what kind of climatic extremes? Regarding temperature range, if we consider mean annual average temperatures, extremes are not so evident. It is more clear if we focus on summer maximum temperatures, because frequently reach more than 42 or 45 degrees, such as in our region, Aragon, where Zaragoza is located, as you can see in this map, when summer maximum temperatures are reflected. And these maximum temperatures in summer are well known now, but they also appear in future projections, like you can see in the Giorgia Lionello map again. But in the same area, we also can record important minimum temperatures in winter below zero. So, inner continental Mediterranean areas, including northeastern Iberia, are regions of temperature extremes, and also suffer strong winds, frequently reaching more than 40 kilometers of intensity, such as, again, Aragon region, both in the valley, here in Zaragoza, and in the mountains, in the Pyrenees. As you can see in this graph with the red curve of Benasque, who shows winds intensity evolution during the first part of March last year. Regarding precipitation, is the most important variable in the Iberian Peninsula climate. Lowest values are mainly concentrated in inner continental areas, shown in orange and red color in the map, and rarely reach more than 400 or 500 millimeters. Importantly, In summer, we observe the typical dry season of Mediterranean climate, but especially intensified due to high evapotranspiration. Thus, high evapotranspiration index and hydrological stress probably are the most important climatic features to be considered in future projections for inner continental Mediterranean. The consequence of this intense hydrological stress is the expansion of desert areas, such as those existing near Zaragoza, for example, of Monegros region, as you can see in this wonderful picture. So, inner continental areas of Iberia are a perfect case study to understand how severe extreme climate conditions, like those projected to future global change scenarios, have already impacted on Mediterranean environments a long time. Unfortunately, we don't have sequences covering the whole territory, preventing a detailed, complete reconstruction everywhere, because taking into account its current varied biogeographical context with parkland structure, inner Iberia has a complex polyenvironmental history. If we make a zoom for northeastern region, one of the continental areas most affected by extremes, and we consider main available polyenvironmental data for the last glacial cycle, and we select the best well-dated and the longest multi-proxy lacustrine records with palynological sequences, what do we find regarding climate variability and vegetation dynamics in continental Mediterranean Iberia for the last glacial cycle? Firstly, I think that it's important to know what do we know. We are going to consider two main master sequences for Mediterranean climate. First, ODP, Marine Sequence 977 for the sea surface temperature reconstruction from Alborán Sea in Western Mediterranean. And in the other side, woody taxa fluctuations at Tenay Philippon palynological sequence, a reference for moisture availability in the Eastern Mediterranean and for the whole basin. So what do we know? You can see in blue the temperature sea surface reconstruction, and in green the variability of woody taxa evolution, fluctuations. So, during the first interglacial period, the Hemian, we can observe a rapid temperature increase and a coetaneous expansion of woody taxa, including mesophytes, which reflect a consequent increase of moisture conditions. Cold conditions and open landscape, dominated by steppe herbs and not by woody taxa, occur during MIS-4 due to the decrease of temperature and the increase of aridity. An intense climatic variability full of abrupt climatic changes characterize both MIS-3 and MIS-2 in a generally still arid and cold scenario dominated by open vegetation steppe landscapes. The following interglacial, the Holocene, also show a rapid temperature and moisture increase and expansion of woody taxa. So, what do we expect to find in inner continental Iberia for the same period? Similar results? I would love to say yes, but the true answer is not always. Something exciting, but really difficult too. Regarding vegetation dynamics during interglacials, do we find the same trend that other traditional Mediterranean sequences like Lago Grande di Monticchio or Tenay Philippon, for example? Are there similar results in close areas? I will try to answer this question showing Villar-Quemado sequence and very preliminary data from the Conquezuela record. Let me introduce you El Cañizar de Villar-Quemado sequence, the only multi-proxy lacustrine sequence of northeastern continental Iberia that covers both the last two interglacials and glacial cycles with a robust chronological model and independent chronology. These are all the methods that we have used or tried to construct the chronological model of Villar-Quemado sequence, despite we only have been results from some of them, mainly radiocarbon and luminescence. So, this is the final result, and it is until now the best independent chronological model for a long continental sequence in inner Iberia, covering for the first time in our area the last 130,000 years. This unique sequence shows a complex paleo-hydrological evolution. Carbonate lake, peat bog, clastic lake, and distal alluvial fan lacustrine sediments alternate along both interglacials and full glacial periods, showing local intense paleo-hydrological variability. However, vegetation at regional scale not always correlates with local paleo-hydrological variability, but on the contrary, shows intense resilience. If we focus on the base of Villar Quemado, we can observe that despite humid conditions are clear in paleo-hydrology because both peat and carbonate lake alternates during the end of MIS-6 and the wall MIS-5, vegetation is also similar but mainly different than expected for MIS-5. No mesophytes dominance as a consequence of moisture conditions occur, but resilience of conifers, well adapted to intense continentality, is recorded, as you can see, with Pinus and Juniperus fluctuations along the wall MIS-6 and on the wall MIS-5. During the Eemian, Juniperus and Artemisia show high proportions, and theoretically it's a warm, humid period. Mesophytes develop, but slowly. It's only anecdotic, not as expected, or similarly to the previously mentioned, for example, Tenayi-Philippon Mediterranean sequence. Juniperus turifera is probably the best adapted species to extreme temperatures both in winter and summer, and supports well intense hydrological stress, as well as steppe herbs like Artemisia. Is a very representative taxa of continental areas affected by extreme climate conditions and low moisture availability due to high evapotranspiration. Lago Grande di Monticchio record important values of Juniperus and Artemisia too, like in Villar Quemado, but at the end of the MIS-6, when glacial conditions, and they disappear as expected when the Eemian interglacial begins, and the most part of the MIS-5 Quercus rapidly develops, dominates, and show warm and moisture conditions. However, orbital parameters for the Eemian agree with an intensification of continentality and seasonality. So, vegetation composition in Villar Quemado is the consequence of extreme temperatures and hydrological stress, similarly to current times, but even more extremes due to maximum summer and minimum winter orbital curves. Well-adapted taxa to opposite extreme temperatures, both in summer and winter, and high hydrological stress usually resist better climatic changes. This is the resilience. So resilience is a clear character of vegetation in continental Mediterranean areas, and conifers, junipers by Pinus too, and steppe taxa, Poaceae, Artemisia, and Chenopodiaceae are the main protagonists of this unexpected vegetation during the Eemian and the MIS-5. However, resilience is not enough when MIS-4 arrives. Juniperus and Artemisia almost disappear, as well as other thermophytes, while deciduous Quercus, not aridity tolerant, persists, suggesting colder but probably humid conditions because carbonate lake type persists, as is evidenced by the sedimentary sequence. So cold and humid conditions implied a great and rapid expansion of glaciers. It is for these climatic conditions, cold but humid and not so arid than expected, that the maximum advance of glaciers in northeastern Iberia mountains, like in the Pyrenees, doesn't correlate with the global late glacial maximum during MIS-2, but occurs now during MIS-4 at around 60,000 years. If we focus on the upper part of Villar Quemado, and we selected taxa, we can observe during MIS-4 that Pinus, but not Juniperus, dominates in an open steppe herbs landscape. When MIS-3 arrives, sediments show dominance of alluvial fan deposits, so arid conditions which imply low pollen preservation in some levels. As we can observe along the wall MIS3, the most arid period of Villar-Quemado sequence occurs, including oxidation processes recorded in sediments. And Pinus and Artemisia are still the main protagonists of the pollen sequence. Interestingly, if warmer conditions arrive, Juniperus expand again a little bit and disappear when colder conditions return. Arid conditions during MIS2 prevent preservation of pollen during the late glacial maximum. High hydrological variability, including oxidation processes, occur, preventing maximum advance of glaciers now during the late glacial maximum, as I have shown before. Do you remember my question from a few slides ago? What we do expect find in intercontinental Iberia for the last glacial cycle? Similar results that in other well-known Mediterranean sequences? Or at least are they shaping a similar trend between them or between close sites? I would love to say yes, but the true answer is not always again. Currently, we are working on Conquezuela Paleolake sequence, a site near Villar-Quemado, and apparently is completely different. No similar trends in vegetation dynamics are recorded in both sequences. It is not Juniperus, but Quercus and other mesophytes, the main arboreal taxa dominating the vegetation composition in Conquezuela during the Eemian. Despite both areas, Conquezuela and Villar-Quemado have intense continentality and similar hydrological stress. So even in sites that are close to each other, we may find different taxa. Do you remember that I said that Iberia is a complete and complex puzzle, as we can see with palynological results? So do you think that inner continental Iberia fit well with the well-known pattern for the Holocene? Does rapid temperature and moisture increase, expansion of body taxa like during the Eemian? Again, I would love to say yes, but the true answer is not. And what about residents, junipers, pines, and artemisia? Are they always present during interglacials? Are they also present during the Holocene and everywhere? Let me introduce you now the Estanya Lake sequence located in the Pyrenees at a mid-altitude location. It's the only multiproxy lacustrine sequence of northeastern Iberia, which covers the whole deglaciation, the late glacial and the Holocene periods, with a tiled lake level reconstruction and again a robust chronological model. Interestingly, in Estanya sequence, unexpected results are recorded both at the beginning of the Holocene and during the well-known Younger Dryas too. The Younger Dryas is a global cold period with a clear temperature drop, more intense in high-altitude mountain areas. Following Estanya lake level reconstruction for the interval between the late glacial and the beginning of the Holocene, we can observe that the Younger Dryas is not the most arid period. On the contrary, during the beginning of the early Holocene, when new maximum seasonality occurs, not humid conditions but temperature extremes and consequent hydrological stress is evidenced with the lowest lake level reconstruction of the whole Estanya sequence. And regarding pollen contents, during the late glacial, conifers persist, both Juniperus and Pinus, and steppe herbs dominate, obviously, mainly with Artemisia. Some levels of low pollen preservation point again to high paleohydrological variability and some moments of aerial exposure and oxidation processes. Betula is also present as typical pioneer tree in the Pyrenees during the late glacial conditions. But during the Younger Dryas, an expected increase of mesophytes, Quercus, and Mediterranean taxa occur, indicating that probably nearby refuge areas develop due to migration because extreme decrease of temperatures in altitude occur. And during the beginning of the Holocene, intense continentality, so extreme temperatures and evapotranspiration, are shown by, again, high Juniperus proportions, no mesophytes, increase of steppe herbs, including artemisia, and minimum proportions of aquatics. So, what about vegetation dynamics during extreme conditions? The same taxa which dominate MIS5 pollen spectra in Villar Quemado, so conifers, mainly juniperus and also steppe herbs, are recorded at the beginning of the Holocene in Estaña sequence, showing an intense, resilient character of Mediterranean vegetation composition related to insolation parameters during interglacials. Similarly to the beginning of the Holocene in Villar Quemado Paleo Lake, which is dominated by resilient conifers but pines and not juniperus in that case. But not for mesophytes expansion because no rapid moisture conditions occur never until the moment in continental Mediterranean areas of Iberia. So frequently, terrestrial vegetation in continental inner Iberia saw a resilient behavior during millennium scale evolution, while impact of short periods of abrupt climatic change are not clearly recorded everywhere. However, in other sites, for example at higher altitudes in the Pyrenees, when extremes in winter temperatures occur, but not usually hydrological stress, or extremes in summer temperatures, the record of abrupt climate changes in vegetation responses is evident, like, for example, in Portalet or Bassa de la Mora. I show here the Bassa de la Mora summary diagram, and cold and arid events recorded in the North Atlantic during the early Holocene are shown by yellow bands, showing a rapid impact in vegetation with decrease in mesophytes and conifers expansion, because mesophytes are developed since the beginning of the Holocene. So, not resilience, but response of vegetation is recorded in this kind of records. And what about humans? Are they influenced by abrupt changes, or hunter-gatherer groups adapted to climate variability, such as resilient vegetation? Hunter-gatherer groups likely responded to abrupt events with migration episodes in areas supporting extremes. More than 200 radiocarbon dates from 40 archaeological sites are concentrated at the beginning of the Holocene, the same period, in a high vulnerable small area, which usually reach intense and extreme summer temperatures. As a consequence of aridity increase during the well-known 8.2 event at the beginning of the Holocene, abandonment of the sites, migration processes, and changes in patterns of human occupation occur. As we can observe in these curves representing an approximation of human occupation frequencies, result of radiocarbon dates accumulation in every archaeological site, an archaeological silence is suggested after the 8.2 event. The aridity increase occurred during this period and implied increase in hydrological stress. Resilient vegetation persists, but for hunter-gatherer groups were not so easy. Humans need both water and game animals for survive, and if water decreases, animals move, and therefore humans too. Migration to nearby mountain areas was the solution at this moment. New archaeological sites show the same material and rock art and begin their occupation at this moment. Thus, they move to the nearby mountain areas and they are the same humans. But again, as usual in paleoenvironmental history of Iberia, there are diverse responses and not a common trend during climatic crises, both in humans and vegetation. If we consider now nearby areas with similar bioclimatic conditions, like Arba de Biel archaeological sites and the Estaña lake sequence, we already know that vegetation dynamics during the Younger Dryas and the beginning of the Holocene were unexpected in this region, showing a refuge area in the Younger Dryas and an intense resilience during the early Holocene. That's what we should expect for humans. Was Arbadell a refuge area for humans during the Younger Dryas, as well as near Vistania Lake environment for vegetation? If we consider again the curve representing an approximation of human occupation frequencies, result of radiocarbon dates accumulation in every archaeological site located in Arbadell area, we can observe that during the beginning of the Younger Dryas, human occupation level persists, but afterwards not. So the answer of the question will be partially yes, or perhaps. And during the beginning of the Holocene, what's happened? Humans persist as adapted vegetation to extremes, despite it's the moment of lowest lake levels recorded in Estania sequence at the same period? Apparently not, but it is not too clear. So, we humans are resilient? Again, I will be to say yes, but probably the true answer is not always. And I need return to the beginning of this talk and the varied vegetation landscape in inner continental areas of Iberia with the aim to show you some conclusions or more questions, because it has been obvious that I like very much questions, despite I cannot answer most part of them. So most of the apparent inconsistencies and or unexpected results shown from inner continental Iberian sites could perhaps be the result of an incomplete record, but also illustrate the great heterogeneity inherent to Mediterranean regions and focus a new interest in areas under extremes and hydrological stress. Interpretation of past human interaction with the landscape become more difficult, if possible, in regions with extreme events, resilient vegetation, and variable landscape dynamics. But they also provide an opportunity to improve our knowledge about Earth's past environment at local regional scales in order to obtain better and more detailed scenarios of human interactions with future climate and environmental changes as species promotes and society demands. These areas must be considered with caution in future projections and treated fully by PAGE's community. So this work is the result of a big team, the Paleoipe team. Thank you very much for this work this week and all these previous weeks. And thank you all for coming to Zaragoza. Thank you very much.